Hello everyone, and thank you for joining me on this presentation about author websites. I hope that it will be super useful to you and that by the end of it you'll be able to figure out why you should have an author website and what should be on it and a little bit of how to go about that in the first place. So, first of all, who am I? Why should you listen to me? So, my name's Sara-Jayne Slack, and I'm the managing director of an independent publishing house called Inspired Quill, which will be turning 10 years old this year, which is equal parts exciting and scary. And I've also been a digital marketer, so you'll see some jumble of letters there, so SEO, CRO, and UX focus. So that basically means search engine optimization, conversion rate optimization, and user experience focused. And I've been doing that for about 10 years now, as Inspired Quill is not my day job, as it were. So that's kind of my professional, both parts of my professional background. So, what's this presentation about? Why should you spend the next sort of 45 minutes listening to me? So, we'll be going through a number of things. First of all, why authors should have a website. We'll be going through the difference between free and paid hosting and URLs, the best platforms to use and why they're the best. So, where should you go to create your site in the first place? Who the website should target. So should you be looking at readers? Should you be looking at other writers or a mixture of both? What your website should include, so the different pages your website should have. And I've added the letters MVP there, which mean minimum viable product. So what's the least amount of work you can get away with, but still be sort of value driven in what you're offering? We'll talk a little bit about website accessibility and why that's important. We'll also go through whether blogs are obsolete, which is a little bit of a contentious topic, but I hope that I can draw you to the side of the fact that blogs are still very much useful to authorial websites. And then we'll also go into how to use your website for marketing your books. And we'll talk a little bit about search engine optimization tools when you're not within the realm of SEO usually. So this is to do with making sure that potential readers and visitors can actually find you on Google when they type something into the search. So without further ado, let's get into it, shall we? So why authors need a website? First of all, it's a way to own your digital footprint. What do I mean by this? Well, we've all been in the situation where we've gone onto Google and we've thought, I wonder what comes up when I Google my name. Or for those of you with pen names, I wonder what comes up when I Google my pen name. So having a website ranking in Google, so that means having a website that comes up in the first half of the first page of Google, lets you own your digital footprint a bit more. Obviously, it means that no one else can get the website URL. It's yours and you own it. And it also gives you a little bit more legitimacy. If there's sort of 20 Jane Smith authors out there, it gives you that kind of legitimacy over the others, rightly or wrongly, of course. It also shows potential colleagues. So in this instance, by colleagues, I mean not your readers. So publishers, if you're looking for agents, if you're looking to work with bookshops or libraries or event organizers, it shows these people that you understand your audience and you can then give them easy access to important information that positively influences their decision to work with you. It also creates a shop window for your books. So even if you don't have the option for people to buy books directly from your website, because that's getting into sort of slightly more techie e-commerce, the more techie e-commerce landscape, it still creates a shop window, so people can still come in and browse and hopefully click on links that then take them to places that they can buy your book from directly. A website is also a way to let readers interact with you and get to know your authorial brand before they purchase one of your titles. And as a bonus, it allows you to get to know them too. And we'll come on to this a little bit later. It allows further creativity and safe experimentation. What do I mean by this? So a website allows you to try out different authorial voices. It might be a way for you to put some shorter fiction or even serialized fiction. So, you can bring out a new chapter of your book every week. You can pop up some, drabbles or flash fiction or poetry that you're just playing around with and get real-time feedback as long as it's part of the brand that you want to portray. It has the potential to reach a wider audience than other marketing alone. So this is where the search engine optimization comes in. You will write 50 blogs, let's say, and one of the blogs you write, let's imagine it's something to do with character tropes. So this is something that we did a few months ago on the Inspired Quill website, just a blog about character tropes, nothing particularly deep, just the top 10 character tropes. And a lot of people find the Inspired Quill website through this one blog. So not all of them are going to be people who are specifically looking for you as an author or your book title. And they might just kind of stumble across. But if they like what they read, that then gives you the reach. They might come back for more stuff. They might interact with you. They might say, hey, actually, I do like the look of this book. Now I'm here. So that's a really massive asset that you can harness in the right way and push your website forward. And a website also gives you the opportunity to tell people what you want them to do. Okay, so this in the digital marketing industry is called a CTA, or a call to action. Not to be confused with a call to arms, which is something completely different. So a call to action can be anything from sign up to my subscription list or buy the book. It allows you to kind of focus the visitor's journey, if you like, in a way that you don't really have access to do on other mediums, right? On Amazon, if I'm allowed to use that word, it's all about, buy the book, buy the book, buy the book. Whereas on social media, it's all about, like and subscribe, like and subscribe. On your website, because it's yours and you own it, which is another very important point, actually, you can decide what your priority is for your visitors, which is a really powerful thing to kind of have in the palm of your hand. And also, finally, having a website is kind of largely expected. It's a show of legitimacy. So if you think about, any big name, celebrity, author, book series, anything like that, if they don't have their own website, you kind of think, well, do they really mean it? Is it really a thing? Do I trust other sources of information as well, which is an important consideration. So this kind of adds legitimacy, especially if you're an author who, you're just starting out. You're either looking for representation or you're subbing to different publishing houses, or if you're an author who has already published sort of 5 or 6 books and you're just looking for that extra nudge of authenticity and legitimacy, a website can really, really help. So, getting started. Now, this is where a lot of writers and creatives in general, I guess, tend to get all caught up in themselves because, you want to do it, but you want to do it right, and you want to make sure it has all the right widgets and the special shiny effects and the different things. And first of all, you need to just take a breath. All of the information out there can be incredibly overwhelming, and slightly unhelpfully, the answer is there's no right answer, really. So, for example, on the free versus paid, which is best, Well, first of all, of course, it depends on your budget. The truth is that paid platforms don't have to be ridiculously expensive, and having a URL that you choose is often seen as an indication that you're serious about your craft. And I'll put serious about your craft here because obviously, you could be serious about your craft and have a, Sara-Jayne/wix.com, for example. But again, it's looking at that perception. So many URLs cost less than £10 a year. So to give you an example, the inspired-quill.com costs, I believe, £8.99 a year for me to have. And they can also be mapped onto free hosting for an additional £10 to £20. So, for example, with WordPress, if that's something that you're looking into using, I believe the mapping, so instead of having, inspiredquill.wordpress.com, having my £10 a year URL on .com, so it sort of redirects through, I think is about £11 a year. So for £20 a year, I've got my .com website. Of course, in the back end, when you're going in and trying to change things, it's not going to have the same flexibility because it's the free version, but it will definitely be enough for the basics, certainly to begin with. So just a quick note on URLs actually is that I come across a lot of authors who have, let's imagine you have a book series that is, the series of, I don't know, let's say Tales of Rinland, right, which is a book series that Inspired Quill have published. So Tales of Rinland. Now, the author, Dorothy Windsor, instead of having talesofrinland.com, has dawindsor.com. Why is that? Well, the reason there is that eventually she might want to write something that isn't a tale of Rinland. And if that happens, does she really want to spend a lot of time maintaining lots of different websites? Probably not. You want to be writing and not maintaining constantly. So just have a think about what you want your URL to be. If you're planning on always writing in the same world, then fair enough. If you're not, then definitely consider an author website instead. We'll get onto this later, but you can always optimize your site so that, if someone does type in Tales of Rinland into Google, that site will come up as well as someone who types in Dorothy Windsor, for example. So there are dozens of different platforms out there where you can fairly quickly and simply, and I won't say easily because it's always a very steep learning curve, get online pretty quickly, right? So the top three, if you like, tend to be WordPress, Squarespace, and Wix. Now, each one has its advantages and disadvantages. I'm not going to sit here and roll my eyes at Wix if that is the kind of website where you just want to go in, get it done, just to have something to, put in the back of your books or on your bookmarks or whatever, somewhere to lead people to. You just want to get it sorted. That's completely fine. I've actually seen some quite nice Wix websites in my time. However, Squarespace tends to be a little bit better in terms of the options that it gives you for proper customization, owning your content, all of that sort of thing. And WordPress tends to be more of a learning curve. Some people just can't get on with it at all. It took me a long time to get along with WordPress. I've been using it for about 12 years now. And that tends to be better for folks who maybe want to add, for example, an e-commerce section. If you've got 5 or 6 books or even 1 or 2 books and you want people to be able to, download the ebook direct from your website, or you've got a box of books stacked in the background and you want to sell them direct, that does tend to be a very strong opportunity that WordPress can give you. So I'm not going to sit here and say you absolutely need to use XYZ. I would say for the folks who just want to get something sorted, sort of minimum viable product, Wix is completely fine. For the folks who perhaps want to future-proof a little bit more and don't mind that sort of fairly steep, it can be, learning curve, then definitely WordPress is probably more for you. Before you decide on all this, there are some questions that it's going to be really useful for you to consider. So, does it include options for both static and dynamic content? So if you imagine something like Tumblr, for example. Now, I've not used Tumblr in 4 years now, so I'm not sure if it's changed since then. But previously on Tumblr, you could have it as a sort of blog, if you like, but there weren't any pages that were static. So by that, I mean there weren't any pages where you could have a little link to it and just have information that doesn't change. It doesn't scroll, it doesn't go anywhere, you just click on the link and there's the page. Whereas with the rest of it, obviously you kind of scroll and as new things come up, old stuff gets pushed down. So ideally you need a platform that includes options for content that stays the same, even when you publish new content, unless you specifically update that content. And dynamic content, which is basically blogs. So when you post a new post, the old stuff gets pushed down and people can still look at it, of course, but it's not sort of there and in their face to begin with. Second question, does it have pre-made templates? So if you're not a web designer, if you are, hi, what are you doing here? If you're not a web designer, it's really useful to pick a pre-made template to start with. Once you get further down the line and become more confident, you can then customize it, which is the next point on this list. So making sure that there's enough there for you to begin with to get you started, because one of the themes that we'll keep coming back to within this presentation is good enough is good enough, right? Choice paralysis is a massive thing, especially when building websites. It's kind of, I want everything to be perfect before it goes live. And I would say with a lot of confidence that getting it good enough is better than trying to get it perfect and then never launching. Absolutely 100%. And actually, your website should never be perfect. And in fact, a website can never be perfect because you should always be iterating and improving and adding content and optimizing and keeping up with, the Google algorithm, which again, don't worry, we'll come on to later. So, Inspired Quill, for example, has gone through 3 or 4 different iterations of its life cycle now. And, I think I've spent about 6 or 7 hours over the last week just updating the filter on the books page. So constantly updating and customizing and tweaking and improving. Is the user interface straightforward enough for me to use? So I mentioned previously about the learning curve. So to begin with, you want an interface that, even if there's shiny stuff, extra stuff that you can do in the top corner, you just want to be able to post something. You want to be able to stick some content on a page, maybe with a little bit of an image, and get it sorted. You don't want to be, having to scroll through YouTube for 10 hours just to get something simple up. It's got to be intuitive enough for you to use almost straight away, and then you can sort of enhance your knowledge of it as you go. Obviously, cost is really important. Are there any hidden charges? So, checking out whether you pay monthly or yearly, or, what the stipulation is if you want to cancel your membership or your sign up. That sort of thing is really important to know. And, sometimes you get what you pay for. So if you're looking at having hosting, for example, you can get hosting for, $2 or $3 or pounds a month, right up to, £30 a month for, the super shiny hosting that you're probably not going to need, because that's more for e-commerce style websites with hundreds of different products. But there is definitely a happy medium, and just make sure that you understand what you get for what you're paying for. So if you might need help with the more technical kind of cPanel backstage, if you like, setup, then you might want a place where you're able to, talk to someone on the phone instead of just emailing them a support ticket. So that's really important. Can I get my own domain name instead of using a subdomain? So I mentioned this earlier. So for example, inspiredquill.wix.com, maybe not great. The other thing with subdomains is that they tend to be a little bit slower than regular domains, and not seen as favorably in Google. Although depending on the host you use, again, that's changing. So something to bear in mind there. And finally, is it indexable? So does it show up on Google searches? So a couple of years ago, Wix websites you couldn't find on Google. You could look for exactly the sort of words that they were trying to rank for in Google, in the Google search, and it would not come up. And that's because they had effectively blocked Google from looking at the site. If Google can't see the site, Google can't show the site. To my knowledge, that's now changed. Yay! So Wix is now if you need to get it done, it's a legitimate option, whereas before I would not have touched it with a barge pole. So these are all things that, you should consider before deciding which host and what type of platform to use. And I hope that they're useful for you when you are deciding. So let's imagine you've got all of that sort of technical stuff sorted, and the next stage is, figuring out what the site is going to be. The very first question you need to ask yourself is, who is the website for? Because this is going to impact pretty much everything else about the site, actually. So who is your website for? Should you target readers or writers? So the somewhat controversial answer, in my humble opinion, is neither. You should primarily focus on buyers first. So it's important to remember that the folks who buy your books might not be the ones reading it. Quite often, there's a ton of overlap, absolutely, but not always. So when you consider things like people like, bookshops, other distributors, family members. So if you're writing middle grade fiction, it's unlikely that the 11-year-old is going to Google middle grade fiction, find you, buy the book and get it. It's going to be their parents, right? Or family members or friends or guardians or whoever. It's not necessarily going to be the end user, if you like. Businesses, so if you're a non-fiction writer and the business is hosting a seminar on something and wants a book about this, or is having a day about, how to work productively, and you're an author on productivity, great. And as I mentioned, absolutely readers who may also be writers as well. So you can see this sort of Venn diagram starting to overlap a little bit. The challenge that I often find with authors is that many writers forget that the content needs to be for the buyer. So they write what they know. Okay, so they delve into the how to write content. So this is how I create a character, and this is how you can be a pantser, and this is how you can be a plotter, and this is the new thing I found in Word track changes. That's all completely fine, but it's not going to bring the people to the site who are likely to buy your book, unless you're writing a how to write book. In which case, congratulations, you've hit the jackpot. So, bearing in mind who the website is for, what should the website include? The first thing I need you to think about is your navigation. And your navigation are the top links at the top of the website with the different pages on, effectively. So there are some essential pages that every author website definitely should include, and there are some nice to haves as well. But let's start on the essential pages. So you can't have a website without a homepage, right? So you need clear navigation, social media links where relevant, ideally some dynamic content, such as the latest blog post with a sort of read more, and a welcome message and a strong call to action, or CTA, as I mentioned earlier. So this homepage is kind of like your primary shop window, right? It's, for a lot of people, not always, for a lot of people, it's going to be the first page they see, needs to make a good impression, and it needs to gently nudge the visitor to take the next action that you want them to take, whether that's following you on socials, signing up for your your subscription, your newsletter, although we don't call them newsletters anymore, and I'll tell you why later. That's all really a really important factor of the homepage. The next essential page is about the author. So it's been proven by multiple studies that adding a human factor really, really helps this idea of authenticity. So Google has an algorithm that it calls the EAT algorithm, and that stands for expertise, authority, and trust. And basically what Google is saying is that where websites produce this expertise, authority, and trust, they will rank them higher. So it's a bit of an SEO thing, but it just makes sense, right? You want people to trust you, because if they don't trust you, there's no way they're going to buy your books, especially direct from the website, right? So it's important as well to allow your site to read as though you're telling someone about yourself in a conversation. It's not a resume. You can add, some sort of resume element to it. If you want bullet points, that's fine. But the sort of more welcoming paragraphs need to be written as you. Images are also really important to build trust. So, I always say dig out your favorite shot and put it up alongside your bio if you're comfortable doing so. So, as with any other part of the internet, you should only divulge as much as you feel comfortable doing so. And on the About the Author page, you could even add either a written or a video FAQ section, especially if you get a lot of the same questions over and over again. That tends to work quite well. The next essential page is an overview of your books. So a list of everything you've published, along with thumbnail images, a little bit of additional information, and those images link to your individual books page. So let's imagine you've written 3 books. You will have, as your top navigation, so the thing you see on your homepage, you will have my books, or the series name, for example, however you want to work that. And then below that page, you will then have the 3 books listed. So it's kind of, imagine it as an overview and then the specifics. So your book pages for individual titles, this is your opportunity to let the reader have a bit more information about them. So see the blurb, if you've had a book trailer made, reviews, that sort of thing, how many pages it has, where to buy from, the year published, publisher price, ISBN. If you've got a media pack, put that up there as well. You honestly cannot have too much information on your individual books page. The other reason for this, apart from giving the reader lots of nice info to kind of get them interested in buying the book. Oh, this is what I've been looking for all these years. I need this in my life. Click to buy. It also shows Google the sort of context as well. So if your book is, let's use another inspired Quill, Under the Shell. if your book, Under the Shell, a Jack Pillican mystery, is searched for by someone, you want your website to come up first, right? I know there's always Amazon and Barnes and Noble and Waterstones and Book Depository and all of those places. But if you can get your website up, at least up amongst those, you've got a good shot of people coming to your website first, and then you can create that direct relationship with the potential reader, right? You don't have to go through, the Zon or whatever. You've got that direct relationship, which means that, when you bring out a new book, that person's right there. If they buy direct, that's usually, a better profit margin for you, etc. So these book pages are not only a way of getting folks to be really interested in what you're putting out there, but also a way of, attracting Google's attention, which is always important. The next page is a contact page, so ways for readers to get in touch. Now, I would generally suggest a web form rather than an email address. And the reason I would usually suggest this is it stops spam bots from, well, it doesn't stop spam bots. It helps to reduce the amount of spam bots from emailing you. Reiterating your social media links on this page is also a good idea. And also, if you find you're getting the same questions over and over and over and over and over again, adding another FAQ section here is a really good way of kind of overcoming those obstacles before they even become obstacles. Now, the last element that your website should definitely include is a little bit contentious, and that's a blog. Now, the caveat I would add here is only add the blog if it's going to be updated in a consistent way and it's not going to completely stress you out. I have worked with many, many authors who can publish 2 or 3 books a year, no problem. But if they're asked to write 1 blog a month, that's it, just game over. So a blog is great if you can be consistent with it. And we'll come on to this in a second, but I just kind of wanted to highlight that caveat. Having a blog, the reason a blog is so important, well, actually we'll come on to that later as well. So let's head over to the non-essential but nice pages. So for those of you who have published books previously or who have done interviews, having a media page is often a great way of showing social proof for your books. And here you can put links to different interviews, so the different websites or media reviews, that sort of thing. And it shows that you're also acquainted with putting yourself out there and talking to different media places, etc. And this can be excellent if you're looking to expand your reach further. So, hi, I'd love to be interviewed on your blog or magazine or whatever because of XYZ. These are the people I've worked with in the past. The results were really great and people really loved it and engaged with the content. Here are some links. A reader gallery. So why not ask your readers to send in pictures of themselves reading your title? Or if you're the type of author who really loves getting reviews on places like Instagram, why not use, with permission, of course, some of those pictures as well? These kind of lifestyle pictures are fantastic for assisting conversions. So by that I mean it makes visitors who are hopefully buyers, who are also hopefully readers, they can see themselves reading the book, right? It's the same with any kind of image online. So let's say, for example, I wanted to purchase a new pen, let's say, and I'm looking at all of these, static images of the pen like this, and like this, and like this, but I want this pen to, I don't know, go and sit in a field under an oak tree and write poetry. Well, if I see a picture of someone with a pen and a notepad writing under an oak tree, I can say, oh, actually, so they are using it in that instance, and that looks really good, and oh, they look really happy, and the pen's obviously not running out halfway through an important paragraph. That puts me in the sort of mindset of this is how it would feel to use this thing. I'm sure we've all been there. We've seen shiny products on Instagram and we're like, oh, that looks really good. Look at how they're using that. I would feel that good if I was using that product as well. Reader galleries, folks. Really interesting use of conversion assistance. The next non-essential but nice, appearances and events. So I know at the moment it's mostly online events rather than offline events, but that doesn't matter. If you're going to be at XYZ convention or doing a Zoom talk for a local library, you can let your readers know where you'll be next and also where you've been in the past, which is really important. So if you've been on a panel at Worldcon, for example, if you're a sci-fi writer, that's going to pack a good heft of social proof, right? So they've been on a panel at Worldcon and they've done stuff for different Comic-Cons, or they've gone to these local libraries. If you're looking to expand your event horizon, sorry, I obviously need more coffee. If you're looking to expand the amount of events you do, having a list of previous events is really useful to then send to the people that you want to collaborate with in the future, right? Because then they can see, oh, well, they've not done any library events, but they have done a couple of, workshops in, let's say, community town halls, for example. I can see the slight overlap there. Yeah, let's get them on board for this library event. So it shows that you have that kind of level of understanding about how events go, etc. And as I say, it's a great place to kind of let your readers know where you'll be next and where you've been in the past. The last page that is non-essential but could be quite nice is more of a collaborative thing. So I've put affiliates here. Now you can play around with this name, of course. So maybe you and your author friends, whether that's a critique partner or you just hang out with other authors, which is very cool, have agreed to kind of list each other's websites, right? Or maybe you want to help promote your favorite indie bookshop or library, etc. This is the place where you can say, this is what I care about, these are good people, go and support them. And sort of half a dozen years ago, certainly within the digital marketing space, linking out to different websites was like, oof, don't know if I want to do that. These are my visitors, my precious. Whereas now, it's actually really good to link out to other websites as long as those pages open in new tabs, right? Because it allows Google to understand where you sit in the context of the wider market. Okay, so if you write, LGBT steampunk, and you have links out to some LGBT specific bookshops, or you have this steampunk festival that you really love going to and want to help support, or other authors within that space, they're really good signals for Google to pick up on and go, oh, maybe someone typed steampunk, I need to write, raise this website a bit higher. That's a very sort of distilled way of talking about how Google operates, of course, and there are many, many caveats and nuances to that, but that's, it's part of how Google works. So as I say here on this slide, this non-essential list is by no means exhaustive and will differ from author to author. So if there's a page that you really want to create that isn't here, just ensure that it's going to add value to your site instead of being pretty clutter. So there are lots of elements as well, not just full pages, but elements, word clouds, like we're not on MySpace anymore. No one needs word clouds. I'm sorry if you have word clouds on your website, but you really don't need them. No one clicks on them. No one cares. They're just slowing down your website because it's another plugin that's, taking up bandwidth. Remember to KISS. So keep it stupidly simple, right? When in doubt, don't add it because it will just clutter your site. Obviously, there are, as always, caveats to that, but generally, less is more when it comes to not overwhelming folks. So here we go. Are blogs obsolete? Dun, dun, dun. So the short answer is no. The longer answer is a little bit more nuanced than that, but we'll go through why I believe that blogs are not obsolete. And I'm talking now more from the perspective of someone who works in digital marketing. So it's a way to reach everyone who visits your site. So by this, I mean it's a way to keep people on your site for longer if they're interested in what you have to say. You can use blogs to measure engagement. So short of using a piece of software like, for example, Hotjar to track what people are doing on your site, if you have 1,000 visitors coming to your blogs and no one's interacting with you, maybe you need to focus a little bit more on getting those interactions, right? I will always say that it's much better to have 100 people come to your site and all of them take an action. You remember that call to action? Than having 10,000 people and only 50 people taking an action, right? Engagement is absolutely crucial. The rest is vanity metrics. It's like Twitter. No one cares if you've got 500,000 followers on Twitter anymore if none of your tweets have any engagement whatsoever. Okay. We're all wise now, right, to the fact that you can buy followers. So using it to measure engagement means that it's also a good way to create discussion around your chosen topics and to get people thinking and talking about you outside of your core readership. Blogs are also largely expected, so coming back to that sort of perception, and your new readers can browse through your previous posts. So it isn't like social media where you can post twice on, let's say, Twitter about something and only 3% of your followers ever see it because it's just gone so quickly. With a blog, it's there and it's yours, right? And I'll come back to this however thing, which is if you hate doing it, don't force yourself because consistency is key, right? So after hopefully having persuaded you slightly that blogs are not obsolete, we'll go on to website accessibility and then we'll come back to blogs later. So website accessibility, it shouldn't be an afterthought, folks. It really shouldn't. If this whole pandemic nonsense has taught us anything, it's that we should have been doing a lot more in terms of accessibility. We could have been doing a lot more in terms of accessibility before all this, and we weren't, and we need to make sure we don't backslide afterwards. So many accessibility best practices are looked on favourably by search engines, but even if they weren't, it'd still be important to action as many of these as you can. Obviously, depending on your tech savviness and the time you have, etc., depends on how many of these considerations you can comfortably implement. But you should absolutely do your very, very best to implement as many as possible. It can be tedious, of course it can be tedious, especially, looking at this slide here about the included considerations. Alt text on images can seem really repetitive. Videos having closed captions, which have been checked, and it's not just the auto-generated ones where it says, I don't know, milkshake instead of deadly snake, for example. You don't want to get those two mixed up, folks, honestly. So taking the time and effort can be really tedious. Do you know what's more tedious? someone having to sit there and trying to figure out what you're doing using a screen reader, and the screen reader just kind of gives up and goes, no, do you know what? Can't, no, I'm not going through all of these exclamation marks and all this nonsense. I can guarantee that it's worth your time to do this as a just as a decent thing to do and spend a little bit of time on. And actually, a lot of this, while it can be tedious, there are processes and options in place to help you speed this up, right? I know I might seem a little bit intense on this point, but it's something I'm very bullish on and something I'm very, very passionate about. And yeah, accessibility. So looking at these considerations then, images have alt text. So for example, if someone is using a screen reader, or even if the website doesn't load properly for whatever reason and the image doesn't load, it's the little bit of text that comes up instead of the image, right? So on this page, for example, the alt text for this particular image that I have on the slide could be something like, and you shouldn't say an image of, because screen readers will automatically say an image of, so that's redundant. So let's say something like an outline of different accessibility images, including wheelchair users and those hard of hearing. For example, that was awful, but for example, all links have proper anchor text. What do I mean by this? I mean that where possible, you link, the bit of text that you link has the description in it. So instead of saying, for website accessibility options, click here, okay, and click here is the bit of text that you actually click on. A much better way of saying would be website accessibility options, and then the whole section of that, so website accessibility options, is the thing that you click. That's what I mean there. We've already gone through videos having closed captions. No auto-playing media. First of all, it's super annoying to everyone. Second of all, for those who might have accessibility issues, trying to find the right tab with the right section for the auto-playing media to then turn it off is even more of a pain. Don't do it. Let people choose to interact. Don't force them to interact. And on that, no time limits are imposed without the ability to alter or pause. So, click on this blue square within 10 seconds or I'm going to kick you off the website. Don't do it. Not that you would, but all of the text has a sufficient contrast ratio to its background. So we have left MySpace in the dust, people. You do not need bright yellow text on a black background. If it hurts your eyes, don't do it. If it makes you strain, don't do it. If you can't read what's on the screen when you're sitting a meter or a couple of feet away from the screen, make it bigger, make sure that the contrast is better. And input errors are clearly marked with further instructions. So if you do have a section where it's a give me your first name and email address and I'll sign you up to my mailing list, brilliant. If their email address is wrong, you have to tell them effectively. So make sure that if there is an error with something that they've done to interact with your site, that could even be, for example, writing a comment on your blog. Don't make the visitor work harder. Effectively, make it as easy as possible for them to go, oh yeah, I missed off the L in Hotmail, for example. So they can fix that. There will be some accessibility resources on the final slide of this workshop. So when should you post? So we're going back to blogs again now. So when should you post on your blog? So you may have heard the phrase that content is king, and that's fine, it is, but consistency is absolutely the power behind the throne. So if we look at some reasons why consistency is key, it gives you time to promote your posts more than once. So we'll look a little bit later about the whole, if you build it, they will not necessarily come. You have novels to finish as well, or novellas, or comics, or whatever your sort of niche is. You don't want to be in a position where you can't be consistent and do all of these other things at the same time. If your readers know that you publish every first Tuesday of the month, which, for example, we do at Inspired Quill, they'll know when to come back. And the blog absolutely needs to be sustainable and high quality. So posting one amazing blog every month is much better than trying to post 200 words of fluff every other day. You can always increase the frequency once you have a buffer. So if you think, okay, so I'm going to publish once a month, that's great. But then suddenly within, 3 months, you find that, oh, I've got, 6 more blog posts because I was inspired one day and I want to do this. And, I want to write more and publish them. Well, maybe go up to 2 blog posts a month. See how that feels for a while and then increase it again if you want to. It's much better to go from a lower frequency to a higher frequency than get stuck in a higher frequency, start to hate it, start to burn out, take a hiatus, and then 2 months later come back and be like, right, I'm going to do this. And then 3 weeks later have to take another hiatus. Just consistency is key. Hare and tortoise, right? And if you struggle to do these things on a regular basis, maybe take a look at creating a content calendar. It doesn't have to be fancy. You can download templates from the internet. And it's just a case of, this is the date that it's going to go live. This is when I need to have written it by. This is when I can schedule it. So being able to schedule posts is a beautiful thing. This is all the optimization I need to do. Tick, 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 tick. Sorted. Brilliant. So what should you blog about? So we've spoken about why a blog's important. We've spoken about how often you should post. And now we sit down to write and nothing. I've had this problem many times in the past. So the first thing is remember who you're writing for. Readers. And by readers, I mean readers of the blog, not necessarily readers of your books. So the first thing to do is to choose your categories. So from this, you can think about what you stand for. What do you find interesting that may parallel with your work and help folks to find you? What are you comfortable writing about? So just to give you an idea here, the Inspired Quill categories, and usually it's best if you don't have more than sort of 5 or 6 categories, because then it becomes too broad again. So at Inspired Quill, we blog about diversity and inclusion, ethical business and ethical business practices. We have guides and resources, and this can come under, readers and writers, which is really useful. Inspired Quill news. So this is the more personal. No one's probably going to care much, but it's nice for us to have a record of, and stuff about the publishing industry more generally. So keep it authentic as well. Struggles and triumphs are both absolutely legitimate. Guys, I've figured out a way of dealing with this plot hole that I've been struggling with. Here's my process. Hopefully it helps you. Or I've just signed with, this publisher. My book is due out here and here. Check it out on the publisher website. Absolutely both legitimate forms of engaging with an audience. So how long should blog posts be? And you'll find a lot of, again, conflicting information about this, but speaking as someone in digital marketing, generally an update post, so this can be sort of your news, should hit at least 500 words. If it doesn't hit 500 words, then Google kind of goes, well, what am I going to do with this? This isn't robust enough to be useful for anyone. So it's important to kind of have that threshold. For search engine optimization, if you're writing about a topic, so I mentioned previously, for example, about the character tropes, the best performing blog posts in terms of sharing and comments tend to be between 1,200 and 2,500 words, which is obviously a big gap. Generally, the answer to this is how long or how many words does it take you to write robustly about this topic without going into fluff or without cutting out a load of information that folks would find really useful. Which is a slightly more digital marketing way of saying how long is a piece of string, of course. But generally, as long as you're not coming up with fluff and trying to pad it with, nonsense, like we all did at school or university, where it's, yes, the poison that I meant to use for this person, the poison with the poisony poison colour. Don't do that. As I just mentioned, keep your content useful and informative, give value. So don't just think about, this is what I want to write about. Make sure that it's giving important information or value to whoever's reading it. Where you can, create evergreen content or update previous content. So evergreen content is the kind of content whereby it doesn't really go out of date. So the difference between, what happened on this day in this month of this year versus this is how you fix a plot hole, for example. This is how you fix a plot hole is going to be much more evergreen than, the books that came out this year. Okay, so evergreen content tends to be the kind of, gift that keeps on giving. There's definitely a space for timely content, especially if you've got the marketing of your blog to a fine tee. But generally, if you have to pick between the two and everything else being equal, evergreen content is the way to go. And also remember that reading online is not like reading a book, right? We want short, snappy paragraphs. We want lots of nice headings and subheadings and images where relevant. And we want to make sure that folks aren't just seeing a wall of text. So actually how you format your blog is also really important. We don't want to overwhelm people. We've all done it whereby we want to read a blog and the first thing we've done is scroll down and just read the headlines, the headings. And then we scroll back up and maybe read either all of it or just the bits we're interested in. But having those headings, for example, is a really important way of contextualizing that content for people. And again, it's expected now. So definitely something else to bear in mind. So now we come on to how to use your website for marketing. So you've built a website, you're writing your blog, you've done all the pages, the content's as good as you want to get it for now, because, rinse, repeat, optimize, never ends, folks. How can you then use this amazing thing that you've created to get the visitors to do what you want them to do? So you can use it as a shop window. So you can either let people find it by themselves. So this is, for example, through your social media or through Google, for example. You can also direct folks to it. So you can literally say, go to this place. You want to use your website to sell the books or to signpost to bookshops. So even if you're not selling directly through the site, you want to make it as easy as possible for people to go, do you know what? I like this author, love this site, these books look really interesting, let's go. Remind folks about events, as we mentioned earlier. You can build your author brand by connecting with readers and, as I keep mentioning, offering a strong call to action. Unfortunately, it's not a case of build it and they will come. You can't expect to build a website and suddenly get 10,000 visitors a month. It doesn't work like that, unfortunately. So how do we get people to your website? So there are two options. There's a paid option and a free option. So for the paid option, you have things like ad placements, social ads, and Google ads. And for the free, you've got search engine optimization, you've got what's called organic social, and books. So let's dig into these slightly. So for paid website marketing, As I mentioned before, social ads. So these are the little sponsored ads that come up on your, Facebook and Twitter feed, for example. You've got Google ads, which are to do with the ads coming up at the top of the Google search. When you search for something, you see the little thing that says ad. People pay for those. And you've got what's called retargeting ads as well. So you may have noticed that you go on to, let's say you go on to, I don't know, a website for, I don't know, Dragon Riders of Pern stationery or Dragon stationery. And you'll notice that this little notebook that you've been looking at is following you around the internet. And that's retargeting. So you can pay money to target folks who have come to your website and not taken any action. You can also obviously place ads online and offline on different websites, in magazines, that sort of thing. The important thing to note is that if you use paid marketing methods, your calls to action will become even more vital. So you don't just want to throw a lot of money at it and not get anything in return, right? Usually you throw money to get people to come to a website to either take an action, or you're doing it to see how people interact with the website really quickly so you can make the website better. So if you use just free organic methods of getting people, usually that looks like a bit of a snowball. So you're not, usually when a website first starts, you might get, one visitor one day and 3 another day and 2 another day. Pushing lots of people all at once towards your website is a great way of seeing how they interact and then iterating really quickly. So going back to these CTAs then, some examples of actions that you might like your visitors to take could be, obviously, buy the books, to follow you on social media, to sign up to your mailing list. And I've put newsletters here. Where possible, don't use the term newsletters. No one cares about a newsletter. We all know that it's just kind of usually sort of me. Give your visitors a reason to give you their email, right? So get a discount code, download a freebie. Just signing up for, news and events, it isn't enough anymore. You need to give them something. So for example, at Inspired Quill, we offer a 25% discount on all ebooks for a full year when they sign up to our mailing list. And it's, as I mentioned at the bottom of this slide, it's high value, low commitment. So you're looking for, so people are looking to have something of high value and they don't want to spend 20 minutes filling in a form. Usually even first name, last name, email address is too much now. Maybe first name and email address, or just email address. Making things say, hi, Sarah, how are you today, in your, mass email. It does make a difference, absolutely, but it's also a barrier. So you've got to kind of balance that very, very carefully. The other CTAs, of course, is getting in touch to book you for events, stock your books, get your autograph, that sort of thing. So what I mean by, at the bottom of this slide, by removing any potential barriers or objections, it's just that. Make sure that there's no reason for people not to do the thing, whatever that thing is. So going on to free website marketing, then a couple of ideas. Organic social. So organic social is on Facebook, Twitter, etc. Not using their promo. It's just the social that you have organically. Bit of a does what it says on the tin. And also in your books. So in the back of the book about the author, you can find them on their website here. If you have bookmarks, for example, I should have had one by my side for Inspired Quill, and I don't, which is really bad. So you can have your website on your bookmarks, which you might give away as free swag, etc. So this is all stuff that you can do sort of for free. Obviously, the bookmarks might cost you something, but if you're getting them done anyway, you might as well put your website address on there. So I just want to talk a little bit, just a little bit about SEO, which is search engine optimization. So this is the practice of increasing the quantity and quality of traffic, so visitors, to your website through organic search engine results. So Google, Bing, DuckDuckGo, Baidu, all of those different search engines. As a digital marketing project manager, in my day job, I work with people who literally spend all day, every day working on SEO for different clients, keeping up to date with all the latest Google algorithm nonsense. And that's what they do day in, day out. They're absolute ninjas at what they do. Even with all of that effort, it often takes 3 to 6 months to see any robust movement at all in Google ranking, and a further 3 to 6 months to get to page 1 for something that's maybe a mid-level competitive term. So I guess what I'm saying here is, if you're properly going to go for the SEO route and you want to rank for certain phrases and terms, don't be discouraged. It takes a long time, and it takes even more time to maintain that, right? Because if you stop working on SEO, eventually, it's not like a tap with paid ads, because you turn the ads on and people come to your site, and you turn the ads off and they're not there, so people don't. With SEO, there's a little bit more flexibility there, but you will start to backslide. So be kind to yourself is what I'm saying. You can't expect to be page 1 of Google for, fantasy book within the first year, probably. So author SEO for the non-SEO. So here's a very simple step-by-step breakdown of SEO. Step 1, know your audience. And this is something that we've touched on briefly, so you should have at least a good idea of the audience that you want your website to get in front of. Step 2 is keywords. So you need to sort of get into the mind of your audience and go, okay, so if I was this person, what would I type into Google in order to get a result? So if you are an author who wants to work with librarians, maybe that librarian would type something like, I don't know, local YA authors, Michigan open event, or authors doing events, this place for this genre, for example. So knowing those keywords are really, really important, because that's where a lot of your content focus is going to be. When you do your keywords, you'll probably have a couple of hundred of them, just, going through different ideas. You can't try to rank for 200 different keywords at once. It's just not possible. Again, I work all day, every day with SEOs. I do a lot of SEO work, content work myself. And at most, you want 5 to 10 priority keywords that you're absolutely going to go for. One of the great things with SEO is that, for example, if you wanted, I don't know, best independent YA fantasy LGBT author, New York, that's a legitimate keyword, key phrase, but that's a legitimate keyword. What you'll find is, if you're ranking number 1 for that keyword, you're probably ranking number 10 for a very similar keyword with just a slight variation, right? So maybe it doesn't say New York at the end. So what you'll find is that the better you are for some keywords, that will also influence other keywords that maybe aren't priority, but they're kind of nice to have for now. Step 4 is on-page technical optimization. So largely, I mean, can Google find your website and understand your website? So we mentioned earlier about indexing, making sure that you allow Google to see your website and that it appears, regardless of where that is for now. And things like making sure that it's HTTPS, so it's secure and not just HTTP, because that makes Google Chrome freak out these days, and people won't go onto a site if it's like warning, warning, malware detected. Even if there's no malware on the site, you need to have that secure, the SSL certificate, basically. All of that kind of stuff is technical optimization. You've then got content on page optimization, so text and media. So by this, I mean making sure that that the text is easy to read. You've got really good headings that go for the keywords. You've got things like your metadata and description, which is the little bit of information when your website comes up on Google, the little title and the little description. That's the meta title and the meta description. You want to make sure those are optimized as well. So do not let your homepage say homepage. Please, 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 please. At least have your author name or your book name, or even better, Dorothy Windsor, author of Tales of Rinland, for example, as your meta title. Saying things like homepage or contact doesn't mean anything to Google, won't mean anything to your visitors. Really consider why folks should click on your site rather than someone else's. And also media. So we spoke earlier about accessibility. Remember that thing that you should really, really focus on? So things like alt text, which is really important for Google and is becoming more and more important. Making sure that, your pictures, if you've got, a 500 by 500 pixel picture, don't upload a 10,000 by 10,000 pixel picture. Make sure it's the right size and it's compressed, because that will help the site speed, which is also really important, which we'll get onto in a second. On-page optimization, specifically for other types of media here. So looking at mostly video and audio. So it's always better to embed video. So get a YouTube or Vimeo or Wistia account, for example. Get them embedded in the site. Don't upload them, because that will slow the site down. That sort of thing's really important. Then you have off-site optimization. So where is your website mentioned on other websites? Does it link back to your site, which is incredibly important for SEO? Backlinks are a massive thing. So if you were to do let's imagine you do an interview with a blogger who you really admire. Fantastic. Try and make sure that the blogger says, for more information, you can find Dorothy Windsor at dawindsor.com. And that is actually linked to your site. That's super, super important. And then step 8 is where you go back to step 2 every 6 months to a year and just check through, make sure you're still doing all the right things, you've not slipped. It's really easy when you're in a hurry to fall short, especially in terms of the accessibility stuff. And I'll fix that blog post later. It looks a bit weird and it doesn't have proper headings. And I'll redo that really big image. I just need to get it up. If you have that level of consistency with the optimization, and you put in place ways to do it so that you follow a process, I can guarantee it's going to save you a lot of headaches in the future. Absolutely. So just looking at easy keyword starting points, you're there thinking, I don't know what I want to rank for in Google. What do I want people to type into Google and then find me? Author or pen name, book title or series name. Really easy to start with. Crack those first. Make sure that you're certainly within the top 3 of Google if possible. If you're up against, the Zon or other big places, then you've got a little bit of work cut out for you, Goodreads, etc. But that should be your starting point, because that's going to be the easiest thing for you to rank for. And actually, that's going to be the thing that your closest the people who are going to be the closest to purchasing a book from you are going to be looking for in Google. So that's a good starting point. Anything else, you can kind of figure out as you go along, but I would definitely recommend author, pen name, book title, series name. So for Inspired Quill, for example, it took us a couple of years, but eventually we got past all of the Harry Potter stuff. And now if you type in Inspired Quill into Google, we're what comes up. And even for us, it took quite a while getting there, I think 4 or 5 years. So that's a good starting point, as I mentioned. When in doubt, KISS. Keep it simple. I can't say this enough. Like, a lot of authors, and myself included, when I first started out, I was like, oh, we can do this, and I can have a forum, and we can have this information and do this shiny thing, and this can fly in from this area, and this can be glittery. And at one point I had the mouse icon, so that the click icon on the page turned into a pencil because I thought it looked cool. Get it? Inspired Quill with a pencil? No. It was bad. It was bad, and it was pointless, and I spent a ton of time doing it, thought it looked cool for about 2 months, and then decided it didn't. But that was all stuff that I didn't need and no one really cared about, when actually I should have been focusing more on getting some great content on the site that people actually found value in. So when in doubt, keep it simple. Okay, so based on that, form versus function. So you want the website to look good. I'm not saying that you want it to be super bland and boring, but you can't have it looking good at the cost of it actually working properly. Your website can look absolutely amazing. If I don't know where the links are to click on, or I can't find something, I'm going to bounce. I'm not going to stay on the site just because it looks pretty. I want to be able to use the site, and that should always come first. So looking at user experience really briefly then, it's got to be useful, it's got to be usable, it's got to be desirable. So yes, it does have to look okay. It can't look like a relic from, the late 90s, unless that's your aesthetic, of course, in which case feel free. It's got to be findable. So what I mean by that is not Google finding your site, but the content on your site has to be findable. So I shouldn't have to look for 10 minutes to find a contact page when it should be right there. It's got to be accessible, as we keep going on about, and it's got to be credible. So users have to trust and believe what you tell them, right? And this is where, the different images comes in, the video FAQ, reviews of your books with links to the review, especially if they're on other blog posts or on Goodreads, for example. You can link to the full thing so people can see that they're legit. Users have to trust you, otherwise they're just going to bounce. A little bit of a word on speed. So Google likes speedy websites. Is the sort of TLDR version of what I'm about to say. So they're about to bring in May of 2021, they're about to bring in a new update that's called Core Web Vitals, and you can absolutely Google this after watching this, or if you're watching this afterwards, you can pause it and go and take a look. So Core Web Vitals will look at 3 things: largest contentful paint, first input delay, and cumulative layout shift. So in normal person speak, largest contentful paint is how long does the page take to load? First input delay is how long until I can interact with the page. Now this can mean, I don't know, filling in a form, it can mean downloading something, it can just mean clicking a link. CLS, cumulative layout shift, is how annoying is this page on mobile when I'm trying to read a recipe and suddenly I try and scroll and 30 different things pop up and I accidentally click on something. So cumulative layout shift is after it stopped loading, after I can interact with the page, does the layout of the page change at all, because that's incredibly annoying. And we've all done it where we've looked at a recipe and we've gone to scroll because we want to know, yep, flour, milk, eggs, cinnamon, what's this thing? Scroll, boom, you've hit an ad. We all hate it. Don't do it. And Google, as of May 2021, is going to start taking a much deeper look at these three elements of page speed. And what's going to happen is that if your page is, really speedy, really quick to interact with, and doesn't mess around in terms of, changing things as you're scrolling, it's going to eventually rank you higher. It's going to give you a higher weighting than anyone else. And it's just good for user experience. We hate websites that take forever to load. We just don't bother with them. So this is all Google effectively is looking at best practice. So I guess the whole TLDR version of this workshop is make sure that you are creating a website for people that people enjoy using and get value out of. And if you do that, Google will thank you, regardless of whether you try to, do all the extra bits and pieces. As long as you are able to have a good solid website with good solid information, you can't go wrong, really. At least you won't get penalized. So in conclusion, starting to wrap up now. So author websites shouldn't be sprawling labyrinths. They should be nice and simple to use. Folks should enjoy using them. And you need to consider the primary why. So why is this website a thing? Why am I bothering with this website? And that will instruct the what. So what platform, what hosting, what URL, what pages, and also how. So how am I going to put this together? How am I going to present this information? The best platform to use is the one that you're most comfortable with and will grow with your purpose. Always consider your target audience. At minimum, you need a home page, an about page, a contact page, a books page, and a blog. And I should mention actually that you can get what's called a Parallax page, which is the home, about, contact can be different sections of a page. That's not as effective SEO-wise generally as having separate pages, but it can be done. So as long as this information is on there. Consider accessibility right from the start, and you shouldn't go too far wrong if you've got a process in place. So I need to upload this image, so crop it to the right size, condense it, put the alt text on, put the description on, put it on the site, make sure that it's got the right, the right contrast, etc. Blogs can be amazing, but don't burn yourself out. So quality over quantity any day of the week. And you need to remember to market your website after it's built. So you can't put up a website and then expect people to find it accidentally. You've got to shout about it. You've got to keep shouting about it to a level where it's probably going to feel a little bit uncomfortable. But as long as you're constantly adding value, people are going to thank you for it, right? So if you write a blog post and you think, I don't really want to, prod people on Twitter about this blog post, that might be a little bit of a wake-up call in terms of, well, what are you writing it for then? And incredibly importantly, be patient with yourself. All of this stuff is a massive learning curve. This is only one very, very short webinar on sort of almost like a website 101. We've covered a lot of stuff, not in a lot of detail. And it takes time. I've been doing this for a decade now, and I'm still learning an awful lot. And that's one of the double-edged swords. It's amazing to kind of finally crack that thing that you've wanted to do for ages, but at the same time, that new thing's come in and you've got to go and have a look at that now. So be patient with yourself. It's a massive learning curve, and be curious as well. Keep learning and keep figuring out how to best serve your audience. So I just want to leave you with a couple of resources here. I'm going to try and include a couple more as well, somewhere in Discord if I can. So a couple of things from Inspired Quill, which I'll come to in a second. So if you're interested to learn more about SEO, there's a website called moz.com, which has some fantastic beginner's guide to SEO. So this comes in the form of blog posts, and also they do this thing called Whiteboard Friday, which is fantastic. Definitely take a look at them first. For website accessibility, you've got an accessibility checklist, which you can see there, wuhcag.com. And then you can find the checklist from there, and a contrast checker as well, which is contrastchecker.com, which is nice and easy. And from Inspired Quill, we have a casual to committed course, which is an online course. It's about 2.5 hours long. It's got quizzes, it's got PDFs that you can download and work through. And this is all to do with effectively setting up your authorial brand. We go into a little bit more depth with a few different things. It's usually $147, but if you use the coupon code WriteHive21, you get $100 off that. So it's just $47. If you've got any questions, obviously feel free to ask. And I've decided as well that for folks who buy at least one book direct from the Inspired Quill website, I will personally do a 5 to 10 minute bespoke review of your website, giving you some insights into what's working, what's not working, what you can potentially take a look at changing, etc. And I'm again happy to do that for anyone who's spent the time with me today on looking through this video. And that's it from me. So if you have any questions or queries, feel free to pop them into Discord. I'll be here for a short time after this recording to answer your questions. And if you want to get in touch with me outside of this, I can be contacted via the Inspired Quill website through the contact page. And yeah, I hope this has been useful for you. I know that we've gone into a lot of different things. It's definitely a sort of Alice through the looking glass scenario when you start looking at author websites, etc. But I hope it has been useful. And if you have any questions, queries, concerns, dramas, or feedback, feel free to get in touch. Thanks ever so much, and I hope to hear from you in the future sometime.